What's up everybody, Sam Smyers here. This is going to be a walkthrough of my latest sample pack, the Sam Smyers Tech House Volume 1. This sample pack contains 450 audio samples and 50 MIDI files that are inspired by top tech house artists and songs. One of the main reasons that I want to create this sample pack is because I've been recreating a lot of tech house sounds in Serum, but a lot of people don't have Serum and it can be quite cost prohibitive because it is expensive, especially for those who are starting out producing. So what I did is I took a lot of those tech house sounds from Serum and converted them into one-shot samples. So you'll find many of those inspired tech house sounds in one-shot sample form. They can be used in any DAW without the need for an expensive synthesizer. You can just load these samples into any sampler program. So let's go ahead and take a look at the sample pack, and all of these samples are also 100% royalty free. The first folder, I have the synth one-shots, then the synth loops. After that, I have the drum one-shots, the drum loops, vocals, effects, and the MIDI. Within these folders, I didn't put these into separate folders because I felt like when I am searching through sounds, I don't want to like open up a bunch of different folders. I just want to go to the file that has all the sounds. And because this has 450 samples, I felt like it was pretty manageable to just open up one folder and go through these. So here you've got the one-shots. We can just take a listen. Those are just some examples of some of the bass one-shots. You can put these into any sampler program and then play around with the one-shots. You don't really need Serum. I made all these sounds in Serum. Many of these sounds are modeled after very popular tech house songs. So you can grab these basses, these leads. There's 50 basses, 50 leads, and then I have some other synth sounds. So there's 10 synth sounds down here. I just labeled them with like a number. I didn't get too specific or creative with like the naming. Because I feel like when you're going through samples, you just kind of scroll through them really quickly like that. And you can go through hundreds of samples in a mere minutes, just like going through that. And then that's just how I find the samples that I want. So those are the one-shots. Those are the ones, a lot of those are from kind of like my videos on social media where I'm like remaking sounds in Serum. So I put them into one-shot form. Now let's take a look at the synth loops. Now these loops I've labeled with like key information as well as BPM. I just used 125 for the BPM. That tends to be a middle range for a lot of tech house songs. I feel like tech house songs have been sitting around like 124, getting a little bit faster lately to like 128. So if you have a loop at like 125, it's really easy to speed that up or slow it down a tiny bit. I felt like that was a pretty good middle range. So I've got the key information and BPM. These atmospheres are just like one note. They didn't really have like a key. So I just have like C or G. I really like using C minor and E flat minor for the keys. So a lot of these are just like C minor, E flat minor. Let's check out like a bass loop. Kind of like a Nocky style bass. There's a subby bass. Kind of like a crunchy bass. Let's check out some of these leads. Very bright sounding lead. Organy sounding lead. Kind of like a square wavy pluck lead, kind of like James Hype. So those are just like some of the synth loops. You can check these out. These synth loops are also going to be what I created these MIDIs off of, or these MIDI files are what I use to create the synth loops. So here's all the same bass loop, lead loop, and also the synth loops. So you can take these MIDI files and you can drag and drop them into any DAW. I use Ableton, so I can just take these and then drag them into Ableton. So here's Ableton. I'm just gonna go ahead and drag all these MIDI into Ableton. So here's my MIDI files. And you can see I've got these bass loops, and these also I have labeled with like key and then BPM. But with MIDI, of course, you don't really need BPM, but that's just like a suggested BPM that I made the audio samples off of. This is just like I made them based off of a 125 BPM. So those are the synth loops and also the MIDI. Then I've got the drum one-shots, claps, a lot of standard claps. Let's listen to some crashes. Short crash, 909 style crash there that I just played. Some hats, closed, open, kicks, 25 different kicks. We've got some rise, shakers, snares, some rims, some toms, and those are all of the drums. And then we get into the drum loops. Let's check out the drum loops. Got the fills, and of course with the drum loops, I just did everything in 125 again. So you can easily just speed that up or slow it down depending on the tempo of your song. Fills. Random fills in there. Bunch of hat loops. Let's check out some of the percussion loops. So like snare and percussion loops, ride loops, shaker loops, snare rolls, of course. Bunch of snare rolls, kind of like standard tech house snare rolls, tambourines, and top loops. And after that, we've got the vocals. So the vocals, I've got 25 vocals and also 25 wet versions. So there are also in the lead loops. Let me go back to the lead loops. There's also like a few version of the lead loops that have wet versions. There's like 5 of them. So there's about 30 samples that are kind of like the wet sample versions. So you have like 420 original samples and then another 30 that are kind of like the wet versions of those samples. So these are like the vocals.
And then I told her, bring me the rhythm. Let's go.
So just random vocal one-shots, spoken word type of vocals that you hear a lot in tech house songs. So these are just like vocals that I did. I just pitched them down a bit and then did these like spoken word vocal words and lyrics. So
shake it up. Shake it up. We're gonna go hard.
So there's some reverb on that.
We're gonna go hard.
And then there's just like a dry version. And same thing with these spoken word. They're not really like in a key, but some of them I felt like I could have a bit of a key information in there. So like here, I've got like C minor, but once again, I just did like 125 for the BPM on all these, just keeping it pretty simple. Then with the effects, I've got some impacts, a wubby sound, laser, just like some random effects. Here's a reverse crash. Got some downlifters. Let's check out some of these. Some of these have notes in them. This one's like an E flat note. Uplifters. Pretty long, but you can cut them down to be shorter. So those are all the samples. I'll put a link down below where you can check out like a demo track where I'm using all these samples in like a little loop just so you can get an idea of how you can use these. So now I'm going to open up Ableton, and you don't have to use Ableton. It's just what I have. You can use these samples in any DAW. But one way that you would use something like the one-shots is you just open up something like Simpler or Sampler. So let's do Simpler because everyone has Simpler. I believe only the higher versions of Ableton have Sampler. So let's do Simpler. We'll just open up a instance of Simpler, and then we can just go into the synth one-shots. So there's just kind of like your classic house organ. And you can see I've got a pretty long tail on here. And that is because it'll give you the option to control the release. So if I go into my ADSNR, I can increase my release. I can get a lot of release out of that note. So then you can just like play your keyboard. So that's all you do. You just load it into Sampler. It's already at a C note. I don't need to change the pitch or anything. And then I can just play the melody that I want. So really easy to use these one-shot samples like that. There, if you go to my store, you can find a demo track where you can hear a few demos that I made where I'm just kind of playing around with like using and showcasing some of the sounds. And I'll just play you some snippets of a few demos here so you can hear some of the sounds in action.
Hit me with a bass.
You've got the vocals, you've got the drums, you've got the bass, you have the lead. Here's another one.
House music, rave, techno, rhythm, house music.
And that one's almost like a bass house, tech house style. So very punchy kick in that one, a bit more in your face. This one's a bit more subtle. Using more of like the plucky style lead, and then I have some of those like pad-like basses in there. And all these sounds, I'm just using the one shots and then putting them into simpler or sampler, playing around with them, and then using the drums. So if you do want to grab the Smyers Tech House Volume 1 sample pack, head on over to store.smyers.com.